arts, culture, and tourism. We had a blue ribbon panel with the legislature. But at the beginning of the last biennium, Representative John Michael Parker introduced House Bill 6119. And this really precipitated more collaborative endeavors and a lot of voices from within the culture and tourism sector to come together to really begin thinking about a concrete effort to reapportion Connecticut's tax allocation and invest more significantly in the cultural sector as well as tourism. So these were the early steps, and that really resulted in while that particular bill died in the Finance Committee, the Legislative Appropriations Committee did pick it up in a way that continued that investment through the Connecticut Cultural Fund. And that was Connecticut Humanities partnership with the Connecticut Office of the Arts. And this public-private partnership has been particularly important, impactful in ensuring that all of our cultural organizations are affected in a way that sees investment, this equitable, reliable investment. So these were the seeds of change. In the last fiscal year, we were able to invest a $20 million allocation in the state cultural sector. In this past year, just in December, we made a second round of awards to apportion $10.7 million. What that's allowed us to do, and the purpose of that funding during the pandemic was to provide operating support, principally so that organizations could hire or maintain employment levels. We also look to make significant investments in IT and digital initiatives, certainly with the goal of creating greater access during the pandemic when everything was shut down. And then finally, finding ways to better connect our cultural organizations with K-12 educators and students. And we accomplished much of that. You can see in this graphic, most of the organizations were able to use these funds for multiple parts of this in multiple ways that support the way in which this funding was allocated. And I do want to highlight, there was some concern in the way that the funding was allocated to Connecticut Humanities. But again, our partnership with the Connecticut Office of the Arts has been critical to making this a success. And the adjudication of these grants, I believe, has been seen largely as extremely equitable, transparent, and effective for the sector. One of the things I do want to point out, too, is being able to centralize this funding through Connecticut Humanities allows us to sort of aggregate lots of data. We awarded in the first year of the Cultural Fund 624 grants. In the second year, just recently, 723 grants. That's a lot of cultural organizations that we have data on that we can report back to decision makers in the state to let them know the impact this funding is having. Our goal is to continue this investment to make sure that everything that we've accomplished in the last 2 years doesn't go away. And that's a big part of why we're asking all of you to engage and participate with legislators now. With respect to the Office of Tourism, this has been an important investment as well. These are larger investments in the last couple of years than the state has seen historically. So this is in the first year, FY22, an $11.1 million investment, and this past year a $10.3 million investment. This has transformed in many ways the tourism efforts and initiatives for the state. They looked at different graphics. They created new social media campaigns. and looking at new resources to measure the impact of funding. And just very quickly, and my colleague Frank Burns can elaborate on this, we've seen in the last 2 years increases in the occupancy rate, increase in short-term rental revenues, increase in the average daily rate for hotels, increase in hospitality jobs, total deplanements, and record visitation to state parks. So these investments are working. We can demonstrate that and measure that. And this is what I want to be able to share through all of you to our state legislators. So as part of the continuing this and recognizing that this collaborative effort, this cooperation between arts, culture, and tourism, we saw this initial investment during the pandemic. We came together in December of 21 for an arts, culture, and tourism summit in Hartford to look at the ways that we can come together to educate legislators and to really highlight those things that were critical to identifying top priorities. And that comes out in the meaningful, reliable, and equitable. We worked across the public and private sector. We worked with tourism and cultural leaders in order to work through this. And this past April through November, the partnership and steering committee came up with a roadmap that was based on 6 public convenings, over 200 participants. Many of you have been there or have heard this process or participated in it. So this is what we've come up, and this is what has informed our model. So to be specific, with this $58.5 million annual state investment, we are looking to increase the tourism marketing allocation to $25 million. We're looking to continue the Connecticut Cultural Fund that many of you receive funding through at a level of $17.5 million. That will continue to be administered by Connecticut Humanities in partnership with the Office of the Arts. In order to eliminate any confusion around tourism earmarks, we're looking to preserve tourism fund line items. Those total out at $8 million. We are looking for an increased investment in Connecticut Humanities and the Connecticut Office of the Arts to administer these funds and to continue to create professional development and sector growth opportunities. And finally, a $3 million investment in workforce development. This all is really aimed at renewing and extending the reach of the Connecticut Cultural Fund, continuing to support tourism marketing at a level that positions Connecticut to compete with neighboring states, mobilizing a workforce, and what's, I'll touch on this in a minute, beginning to prepare the sector for America 250, which will be July 4th, 2026. Just a historic look at our funding in the sector, and you can see the tremendous growth in the investment over time from FY19, which was a minimal investment. We see some early pandemic investments, not just from the state, but also the federal government. And we look to continue that in FY24 and FY25. And you can see the breakdown. Tourism is in green, arts and culture is in blue. And then we have the possible funding sources and pathways. This is something we've talked about before, but looking at continuing to increase the allocation from the lodging occupancy tax, bringing in the car rental tax, which is historically been swept into the general fund. That's supposed to be allocated to our sector. And then finally, online gambling tax revenues is a new source of potential revenue. And these will be things for the legislature to decide, but pointing out these pathways is important part of our recognition that the funding is there. Just to highlight some of the areas where we have made tremendous progress and where we see a lot of opportunity. Part of the cultural fund investment has really been aimed at operating support, but we've also formed and forged a number of statewide partnerships with different organizations, including amplifying the funding of the state's, the regional DRSOs. We've invested in the Connecticut League of History Organizations, the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies, the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, the Connecticut Cultural Heritage Arts Program, EPIC, which is an oral history program at UConn, the Connecticut Digital Archive, Connecticut Explored, and the Connecticut Democracy Center. And all these statewide partnerships are aimed at cultural infrastructure. All of these organizations affect all of our communities around the state, and our investment in them is aimed at helping to professionalize and provide different kinds of support to our individual cultural organizations. And just to highlight one or two examples of this, Connecticut League of History Organizations co-produced a program with us called Museum Makeover that we held at over a dozen museum sites across Connecticut to look at how we can deploy knowledge keepers and professionals in the field to help museums tell better stories. We've also been working with them on a Connecticut collections assessment to look through collections, to find these stories, to bring them to the light, and share our important cultural stories with the public. We've also partnered with the Connecticut Council for the Social Studies to enact legislative mandates with social studies frameworks that are aimed at inclusive curriculum, Black and Latino curriculum, Native American curriculum, and so on. These have been significant investments and important investments that will affect all of us. All of you participating on this call have an opportunity to share your stories. We've highlighted a couple of stories here with Stony Creek Historical Society, New London Landmarks, Times Fool Company, and the International Festival of Arts and Ideas. And each of these organizations has used the operating support to expand their reach, affect their communities in positive ways, share their stories. And these have all had an important impact that draw more visitors in, educate more of our residents. And we want to see these kinds of opportunities continue. And we want you to be able to share the impact that this funding has had on you with your local legislator so that they can hear it directly and continue to make these kinds of investments in the sector. Just a couple of our tourism destinations. And then finally, really thinking about the long view. We have a horizon line that looks out at America 250 in 2026. It's actually like 2026 to 2033, if we think about the era of the American Revolution. And just beyond that is Hartford 400 in 2035. So we're looking at the next dozen years or so. And this is really important for us to all think about this concretely, what our role is in building the strength of the sector and beginning to look beyond Connecticut to draw visitors in, to invest our own communities in the resources we have, both for tourism, enjoyment, education, and so on. And then finally, what we'd like you all to do, you can reach out to Frank, to Brett, to me, and again, importantly, reaching out to your local legislator, your representative and or your senator, letting them know the impact this funding has had. And I know I'll turn it back to Brett or Frank if they want to offer any comment additionally to what I've said. And I know we have John Michael Parker on the call as well. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Yeah, I just take a minute, Jason. Thank you for the presentation and the opportunity. And I thank all of you for coming and participating today. I can't emphasize enough what Jason has presented to you. I think it's really kind of an important first step that arts, culture, and tourism have come together. We've found opportunities here that we think will kind of and make life better for all of our organizations that we represent. Again, for the sake of time, I know John Michael wants to get on and say a few words, and then we'll kind of turn it over. But again, this has been certainly a wonderful opportunity for us to work together. We look forward to continuing that as we kind of move forward in this legislative session. And if all goes well, we'll hopefully have the 58.5 million, which many of you obviously will be in a position to share. So with that being said, I'll turn it back to you, Brett, so we can get to Representative Parker.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Jason, for their presentation. I'm going to turn it over to John Michael Parker now. I know he's busy. The session is live, so there's a lot going on for him. Appreciate him joining us this morning, but he's going to give us a little update on what things look like at the legislature at the moment in terms of the roadmap. So John Michael, I'll turn it over to you if you're available.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Jason, for the presentation. Man, you're always so good at that. And Frank, thanks for the support too. I am State Representative John Michael Parker. I serve the 101st District, Madison and Durham, and I'm excited this year to be serving as the co-chair of the Arts, Culture, Tourism Caucus, along with Senator Heather Summers, who's been a longtime champion of this work. I'm keeping my camera off because I'm just about to get to the Capitol. We got a session day today. Just trying to be as safe as I can here. Appreciate all of your time and folks being here to learn about this. I think the main point that I want to make is, and for those of you that have done legislative advocacy work in the past, you know this, the process can take twists and turns as we go forward. And so I really encourage you to stay in touch with your advocacy organizations, the three groups represented here, for the specific next steps as we go along. And the reason I say that, right now, there's a bill that's in the system. I know that was shared out actually specifically this morning through the Nonprofit Alliance, and maybe some others have seen that. The truth is that we don't know if that will be the actual vehicle that will go through the legislative process. And so this is, details that I don't need to waste time with, but in terms of how the actual process, the sausage gets made in the legislature. So at some point, there will be a very clear bill that we're going to ask people to co-sponsor. That's what legislators can do. And we will ask constituents to reach out to their legislators to encourage that co-sponsoring. So a little bit of a hold position now until we, tell you folks what bill to point towards and what link to send with your legislator. But once that process goes forward, we'll then be moving this through different committees. There are different subject matter experts in the legislature that need to weigh in. And ultimately, this will come down to leadership, including both in the legislature and over at the executive branch. So all to say, if you have relationships with folks anywhere along that chain, we encourage you to let them know that you care about arts, culture, and tourism, that you're excited about the ask that's moving forward this year, and that you'll be in touch with them as it goes on. We've got a few months to go here. This will probably not get decided until the end of legislative session in June. So I really applaud the advocates who are making sure folks are organized and informed early. It's only January, so like I said, we've got many steps to go here, but your support is going to be really critical. Making sure that a number of legislators and ultimately legislative and executive leaders know how important this is to the 1,000+ organizations, as you heard about, the $13 billion of our economy, all of the breadth of what the sector can offer, making sure that is loud and clear is going to be so important. So, appreciate you folks being here and your interest, and really please stay tuned as the specific asks. I've only been a legislator now for just over 2 years, but in that time, the bills that I've seen that, make it through with some of the big asks like we're proposing here are the ones that have really sophisticated, organized, and motivated advocates. So people, professional lobbyists, which the sector is doing, the people in their sector to reach out and share. And I will look forward to continuing. So anyone that wants to reach out to me about this, I want to share for now, Brett, anything, or Jason or Frank?
I think that's great. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time. You must be thinking at this point, maybe you have questions. I'm sure you have questions. You want to know how you can help. Can't stress enough, as John Michael Parker said, as this winds its way through the legislature, which is not always a straightforward process, we really need you in the community to be behind this. We'll be reaching out to you and letting you know specific actions you can take. So I wouldn't worry too much about what do you need to do next. But I do want to share some resources and some ways for you to stay connected to the project so that you can stay active in advocacy. I think we're having issues sharing the chat with you all. So there are going to be some links that I'll talk about that Alyssa will send out immediately following this presentation so that you have all those links. But the first thing that you can do to help this project and move it along is to sign up and keep in touch. Alyssa will share a link that you can follow to just add your name to an email list so that we can make sure that we have your contact information and can keep you informed of what's going on. We're also building a website called nextactct.org. It's sort of in its infancy at this point. We've got some resources out there. The presentation that Jason shared is there. There's a 2-page document that sort of lays out the whole roadmap project in terms of its impact and the ask. And we'll be adding resources to that as we go along, some talking points and so forth that you can use. John Michael Parker mentioned that a bill has been introduced. It may not be the final bill, but it is the bill at the moment. It is called HB 6321, an act supporting arts, culture, and tourism funding in the state. We'll send you a link to that. You can take a look at it. There's about, I think, maybe 20 or 30 legislators who have already co-sponsored it. What you can do at this point is to go take a look at the bill when Alyssa sends you the link. See if your legislator has co-signed it. If they have, reach out to them and thank them for being a part of this. If they haven't, certainly reach out to them and ask them to co-sponsor. So this is really important to make sure legislators know that we're here and that we're behind the project. Also, right now, the Commerce Committee has I won't say jurisdiction, but the bill now sits with the Commerce Committee. And so asking them to raise a public hearing for this initiative would be really important. It'd be an opportunity for us to weigh in with legislators on why this is important to us. So if you can reach out to the Commerce Committee, if you have legislators again in your home district who are on the Commerce Committee, Alyssa will share a link to the Commerce Committee list for you to take a look at that. And finally, you can reach out to Jason, Frank, and I on any questions or concerns you have. This was a really big group, so the idea of having a chat and question and answer session, we didn't think we'd be able to make that happen. So I'm sure you have questions. You might have some clarifications. Reach out to us. Again, Alyssa will share our email addresses. It's also in the presentation. And we thank you for joining us. Any last words, Jason and Frank?
Brett, I can't say enough how great it's been working with you and Jason and getting to the point where we are. And I would ask everybody on the call, this is kind of really important for all of us. And to reach out to your legislators and ask them to support. And currently it's, House Bill 6321. It really is significant and have a big, huge impact on the way that we kind of do business and how things are here in Connecticut moving forward. Jason?
Yeah.
And I guess
there's no better time than right now to mobilize. And as much as we're sort of shaping this, it's really going to be up to all of us to make sure that this happens and gets carried through by the legislature.
I think one of the things we didn't really touch on that much is that there's a lot of momentum for this in the legislature right now. So Representative Parker and Senator Summers are the new co-chairs of the Arts, Culture, and Tourism Caucus. They convened a meeting of the caucus right after the session started, which is highly unusual since there's so much going on at the beginning of the session. But we talked to a bunch of legislators on that, all of whom were very supportive. We've reached out to the leadership of the Appropriations Committee and the Commerce Committee. So the work has begun already, and we're seeing a lot of positive response from legislators. So this is the time for you to be engaged in this and make sure that we keep the momentum going. Great. With that, thank you so much for joining us, taking the time to be here this morning. I'm sure we'll all be in touch as this session winds along, and all work together to make this happen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.